Hi, everybody.
Hey everybody, my name is Paige and I'm here to share 6 things that I learned from being on dating apps for 1 month a couple years ago. So bear with me. I got feedback in one of my last videos that it was kind of hard to hear me. A microphone is on the way. But until then, turn that volume up to the max and strap in because I'm about to share some stuff. So, dating apps. Love them, hate them, never tried them. I can guarantee that you have at least some semblance of an opinion on them. For me personally, the strongest opinion I ever had on them was actually when I fell into that last category, as in before I had ever been on them. When I was a really young teen, I used to be very skeptical of dating apps. I would scoff at them and think that they were unnatural and sort of just sad. I would tell myself things like, I will never step a single digital footprint onto any sort of dating app. And I fully believed that for the rest of my life, I would follow that instinct. But that was all before a lot of things. That was before I had significant dating experience. That was before I had turned 18 and tried to date as an 18-year-old. That was before what I deem as actually one of the most important factors for most people that get on dating apps. Because I believed all of those things before I got lonely. Loneliness is a thing that will take you places you never thought you would go. I grew up with a decently sized and rambunctious family, as in twin younger siblings and my parents. There was really never a time in my house where you could not walk into any room and end up interacting with someone. So when I turned 18 and moved out on my own, the contrast was jarring. I was in a new town, in a new apartment, with a new job. My high school friends had moved away to other colleges. I had recently gotten out of a long-term relationship, and my coworkers were rather new to me. I went to school mostly online, so I didn't really have to go to campus a lot, and therefore all of the places that I was very used to being able to interact with people were no longer places that I could do that. It felt like my life had 3 unlocked spaces, which were my empty apartment, my school where I didn't know anybody, and my job where I didn't know anybody. So I was almost debilitatingly lonely. I would go maybe days on end without having any sort of meaningful conversation or interaction with people on a deeper level. No matter how comfortable you are with yourself, it gets to a certain point where you just desire to hear the voice of somebody else. I was really getting to that point. So in a lot of ways, it was partially just loneliness that led me to changing my mind about giving dating apps a try. There was a second motivating factor as well, and this one I think is a little bit less popular to talk about. In fact, there are a lot of people out there, myself included, that like to claim it's not a factor at all. I was a little bit insecure about myself. I wanted validation, and dating apps promise a boatload of it. So yes, I was actually insecure. I didn't want to admit it to myself. I thought, hey, my time on dating apps will just be a change. It'll just be for fun. It doesn't mean anything. It's not really that deep. But in reality, it kind of was. I was newly an adult. My old life had changed completely, and my new life hadn't even started yet. Therefore, all of the security that was allowing me to be confident in myself before had kind of just been evaporated. I wanted to meet new and interesting people, and kind of more importantly, I wanted them to think I was interesting and cool too. It feels good, and it seems harmless on the surface, just to go on a date and see what they think of you. I knew that rejection was a possibility and honestly just a given for being on these apps, but it didn't really matter to me because I was chasing the thrill of just finding someone who could see something cool about me. It's a new phenomenon in the digital age that you can sort of just have a survey of people that get to decide if you're attractive or not. And let me tell you that it feels good every single time that they confirm that you are. But of course, dating apps aren't just meant to figure out if people think you're hot or not. They're also meant to actually go on dates and for a lot of people have casual sex. And that opens up a whole new world of validation. But it's one that's a lot more complicated to navigate when you don't have any experience in it. There are so many people on dating apps, and so it seems like there would be a lot of options. But I found that when you're a young adult with sudden access to every hot single in your area, you're a lot more likely to opt to just go on a date with all of them than to actually seriously consider dating one of them. As a girl who was very used to being girlfriend material in long-term relationships, getting on dating apps was a complete change of pace for me because there would be a person on there that seemed like perfect boyfriend material to me, if not for the fact that his dating goal was set to casual or short term. I started feeling a lot of pressure and insecurity that my selection of looking for long term was sort of turning off these attractive and interesting people that were really looking for something more casual. So once again, I allowed my mind to be changed and I changed my status to open to anything. Of course, I hoped that despite doing this, I would still match with people who had similar dating goals to me. But in reality, when you open yourself up to anything, you're a lot more likely to just end up on a lot of casual and unserious dates than you are to meet up with someone who's more serious. If you give horny teenagers on the internet an inch, they will take a mile, and they will see you're open to anything as sex instead of open to long-term relationships. And this works for a lot of people. There's a reason why casual sex and dating is so popular on dating apps. It's because people want to do that. But it doesn't work for everyone, and it definitely wasn't working for me. When you start to struggle with setting your goals and matching, you end up being a little bit more desperate just to go on whatever date comes your way. And with this comes so many risks. I think we're all aware of the amount of risks that you face when you're meeting up with a stranger you met online in real life. As a young girl especially, I think we are faced with so many horror stories of how dates can turn sour extremely quickly. Even despite all of that, I found, at least personally for me, that I didn't think something bad could happen to me until it actually did. I grew up in a pretty safe town with a pretty safe dating pool, and I thought that I had a really strong intuition, so I was ready to throw caution to the wind, an excuse to have a little bit of fun. But unsurprisingly, this put me in a lot of situations that ranged from uncomfortable to genuinely disturbing. For the sake of the point, I'm going to share a story that actually happened to me, but it definitely contains some sensitive content, so if you don't feel like hearing a story about a scary date, you can skip to this timestamp and I'll be with you shortly. I was on a date with a guy that I had seen several times before this. It had been chill and cool. There was no reason for alarm bells to be ringing in my brain, and so therefore I was willing to take a risk. This was gonna be an overnight date, if you know what I mean, so we decided to just have a little bit of extra fun and take some marijuana edibles. Again, this wasn't that scary to me because I had a lot of experience taking edibles and smoking weed, so I knew that I would be okay. But I was forgetting something very crucial, and that is that you can never predict how another person that you don't know will react to a substance. But of course, this also raises an even bigger red flag, which I am now currently screaming at my past self, which is that, girl, you should never take substances with somebody that you don't know that well. That is such a bad idea. Regardless, we take the edibles and it's chill for a little bit, and then suddenly this guy just starts getting into like hysterics. He's crying, screaming, he's angry, and it's making me really uncomfortable. Of course, I don't know this guy this well. I don't have to sit through his bad high, so I'm ready to leave already. But as I start to get ready to leave, I'm laying on his bed and I realize that I'm having a really hard time moving my limbs. Of course, this could be just because I'm really high, but when you're high, of course, every single horror story I've ever heard flashed through my brain, and I immediately thought that I had been drugged with something different. When I got that thought in my head, I completely freaked out and I asked him if we could leave. This made him extremely upset at me, and it led to him saying something along the lines of, "You're not gonna call the cops, are you?" Once I heard that, any gray area about the reality of the situation just disappeared in my brain, and with every ounce of adrenaline I had, I lifted myself up and I was able to get myself outside and home safely. I am so lucky that this situation went the way that it did for me. I know that it does not go that way for everybody who gets into scenarios like this, and that's truly terrifying. It is so much better when you're dating to be safe than sorry, because otherwise you could genuinely be in harm's way, or at the very least end up with a lot of regret. Unfortunately, regret is not an uncommon emotion to feel after you've been on dating apps. I just want to preface that I'm not coming at this from a purity culture standpoint. I don't think that you need to regret having sex. I'm talking about regrets that come from a completely different area, and sometimes in ways that you would never expect. Connections can follow you throughout your life, even if you didn't have sex or only went on a date with them once. Depending on your social circle and the size of the town that you live in, you might be running into people that you went on dates with frequently, and even after you have a new partner, and that's super awkward. You can't take these things back. For me personally, even casual experiences that I was indifferent to in the moment, I now sort of just wish didn't happen. Not in a self-loathing way, but just in kind of an annoyance way, because they ended up being a lot more water weight in my life than anything significant. I'm currently in a serious relationship of 3 years, and both my boyfriend and I were on dating apps before we met. Because of this, we like to exchange stories and just talk about how it shaped us in our relationship now. But one thing that I found for me personally is that any casual relationship I had completely pales in comparison to a healthy, loving relationship. When you're having a lot of casual sex, you can really quickly forget the value and reality of having a serious sexual relationship. I don't actually regret any of the experiences that I had while on dating apps just because I know differently now. I actually value them because without them, I don't know if I would know differently now. Sometimes you have to have the uncomfortable or meaningless experience in order to fully appreciate when you find one that's real. But once you found one that's real, you're still left to process these other experiences that you've had that don't really fit in as much with who you are or what you like. There are casual partners from my dating app days that think that they own a part of me because we had sex or because we went on a date. They want it to mean something about who I am, that we had these relations, even though they don't mean anything to me. This can be difficult to process later on in your life, so I think it's worth it to take a beat before you go an extra step with a person, no matter how hot or cool they are, because you can't take it back once you have. And I can promise you that peace of mind is 1,000,000 times more priceless than any hookup you will ever find on a dating app. In my personal experience, you do not become a different person after having sex. It's not really life-changing. It doesn't mean anything about who you are. So in a way, I understand why casual sex has become so popular among kids my age. You can have it with no strings attached. It feels like the reward outweighs the risk. But I think that by simplifying sex to the physicality, we're losing the most important part of it. And you really get to experience that when you finally have a healthy and comfortable sexual relationship with someone. Like I said, before I met my boyfriend, he and I both had our time on dating apps. We have had other partners that are not each other, and surprisingly, that doesn't really bother us that much. All of those awkward or disconnected experiences that we had only make our relationship stronger and better in comparison. When I was younger, people would talk a lot about body count and about how having a high one means that you wouldn't be a good partner. But in reality, in adult world, body count really isn't a reflection of how a person will behave in a relationship. My boyfriend is more loyal and compassionate than any man I've ever met, and I am infinitely lucky to be able to share a life with him. It would genuinely be tragic if I had let his body count get in the way of me dating him. A lot of my single friends who spend time on dating apps talk to me about how they feel like love is dead or sex is meaningless, but I think that this is more of a symptom of them being on a dating app when they would prefer to just be building a romantic connection with someone. And I don't think that those two things necessarily coincide all of the time. Dating apps have a function and they have a group of people that they work really well for. But if I'm being honest, I think that the general population is not that target audience. A lot of us are still searching for deep connections and real love, and even though those things are possible on dating apps, they're a lot more difficult to come by. I think that there's a different precedence behind dating apps and dating in real life. My boyfriend and I were on them at the same time, and yet we never met until we started working together. And often we like to talk about how funny it would be if we had actually matched on Hinge or Tinder, because would our relationship be the same? Would the precedence behind being on a dating app lead to us being able to have a 3-year-long relationship, or would we be too caught up in the next swipe? The largest thing that I learned from being on dating apps is something that seems obvious but actually isn't, and it's that every single person that's on there is a real person in real life that you could easily run into by chance, or work with, or go to school with. Yes, real life relationships take more time. They take the guts to get rejected. They take vulnerability, but those are very valuable things, and they're things that you need in order to have a healthy long-term relationship. Sex is not meaningless. Love is not dead, because even if you can't find it elsewhere, you have it within yourself. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of us, you start finding it by saying no to dating apps. If you guys like this video, if you agree, disagree, or just have your own stories to share, do so in the comments down below. I love reading it. Feel free to subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one.
Please do like and subscribe, it helps her.
Yep, thank you.